It's okay sometimes.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 286 of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel, we have Jason Sweat.
Hello.
Jerome Hardaway.
Hey.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. Just a quick shout out. I have next year's conferences up, so you can go check them out at devchat.tv/conferences. Calls for proposals are open on most of them, too. We have a special guest this week, and that is Sam Joseph.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
It's going well. Do you want to give us a brief introduction, who you are?
Sure. I guess I'll say I generally talk too much, so, feel free to cut me off as soon as I'm not being brief. Who am I? I guess my background comes largely from education and academia. I have been very involved in the agile development using Ruby on Rails MOOC, or Massively Open Online Class, for the last 4 or 5 years with Armando Fox and David Patterson from UC Berkeley, and that's available through the edX platform, and I'm sort of a co-instructor with them. I have a kind of honorary position at the Hawaii Pacific University. I taught computer science online for them for a long time. I've also been, I've managed a boot camp in London. And right now I'm spending all my time on this Agile Ventures charity, which is all about kind of creating open source projects that will work with charity customers and clients and sort of get people together to get away from artificial learning and really kind of learn things in context. And I'm kind of, my background goes back to, I have a PhD in cognitive science. I'm being interested in AI, all these things. I mean, I'm kind of interested in learning and programming and coding. I've been doing Rails since 2006, was it? Goodness me. Yeah, and it's all kind of come to a head here in this. Can we do completely in the mix real learning with real charities online with people around the world?
Nice. So that's what Agile Ventures is, right? So it's working with charities, doing open source work. Do you kind of want to explain how that all operates?
Sure. Yeah. So the mechanism that it operates through, the two key technologies that we use are Slack and Hangouts. It sort of all came about off the back of this massively open online class Agile development using Ruby on Rails, or engineering software as a service, as was. And I took a big inspiration from the professors there at UC Berkeley. In their live face-to-face classes, they were doing this sort of charity projects thing. And they were, they're teaching about the agile process of agile project development in their class. And to have the students put it into practice, they would get them together, 50 different project groups, 50 different charities, and, build real stuff for real people. And it was really impressive. And I was like, wow, and the MOOC comes online, and we'll be able to do that with people from around the world. And then I think they were kind of like, well, this is logistically a bit of a challenge. And so the MOOC became just the kind of academic components of their class and the assignments and so on. And so I was like, this must exist. We should have something whereby people around the world, wherever they are, can get together and form a distributed team and work together in a project for a charity. And so originally, actually, we were using Skype and Skype chat a lot. We've kind of migrated through different technologies over the years. But basically, people come to our website. They can read about the different projects. They get an invite to our Slack instance now. And we kind of welcome them and say, what are you interested in learning? What tech stack are you interested in learning? Come and join in. And I sort of serve a little bit as a gatekeeper, just as a suggester to say, oh, you're interested in Node, well, come and work on this project. Or you're interested in Rails or pure Ruby, come and work on this project. And I introduce people to the new projects. They're in the Slack group. And then the other key component is we have these regularly running kind of Scrum Hangouts that are advertised on our website. And basically, it's like we're trying to expose the agile process whereby everybody comes together in the Scrum. We do that kind of daily stand-up kind of thing where you go around and say, what are you all doing? And we do it all in public, and we stream it all live to YouTube so that people can look at it. And, people can just kind of come in and observe and say, oh, yeah, that sounds interesting. And people sort of get accrete together and form into project teams, and stuff gets done sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm kind of curious, though. So do you just bring people in who volunteer, or you bring them in off of the MOOC? Do you have to take the MOOC, which is a massively open online course or something like that? I forget exactly what it stands for.
And the two I always get mixed around. You don't have to take the MOOC. It's certainly we I think we're heavily influenced because a lot of the early people who came in were from the MOOC, but we now have a very diverse community of people doing the course. Doing the Agile Ventures. It's the people who are putting their time in are volunteers. We do occasionally have paid projects. Occasionally, charities will have money and they need something done by a certain deadline, and so we do occasionally have paid projects. But basically, the idea is that people are putting in their volunteer time, programming, and also doing things like UI design and project management and so on, in order to try and contribute to worthy causes around the world. We have, there's a group in Detroit that's trying to help people find jobs there. We've got a group working with Syrian orphans. We've got some Swedish charities, some guys here in London. And it's sort of, from the very beginning when we were looking at this, and some people were saying, oh, we should take on, paid projects for just anyone. And I guess when you've got like a crowd of people all putting in their kind of volunteer time here and there, if it's a paid project, it's a little bit, I don't know, it raises all sorts of questions like, shouldn't this person get paid, or how much should you get paid? And then you start to potentially get into arguments about like how much each person contributed and how much each thing was worth. Whereas if you say, look, we're here for learning, we're here for trying to make the world a better place and help people around the world, it kind of takes that out of the discussion, and then you can get down and focus on the learning and the agile process and having fun with the technology.
Nice. I have a question. I read something on the website which I thought was kind of interesting. It said Agile Ventures is a project incubator that stimulates and supports development of social innovations, open source, and free software. And I guess you kind of explained a lot of that just now. But I wonder if maybe you could explain each of those things. Like, what's a social innovation exactly? I guess I know what open source and free software are, but maybe if you could kind of describe the social innovation part, I'm curious about that.
Well, I think the social innovation part is about wanting to build software that helps make a charity or a nonprofit more effective. I think it's very easy to like get lots of people have toy projects that they do in their part-time, stuff for learning and so on. I think that the most interesting part of software is where you can be doing something to actually solve somebody's problem. And that requires, it kind of comes away from almost like how do you put code together to the user experience. I've been very inspired by courses of people like Scott Clemmer, who is, does this amazing course. People like Raskin, the UI folks, Donald Norman, about. But I guess I'm going to go on a kind of segue here. Is like Donald Norman in his book, The Psychology of Everyday Things, or The Design of Everyday Things. He talks about how people tend to beat themselves up about not being able to use something. They kind of, whether it's a software system or a telephone system or just trying to get in and out through a door, if they can't use it effectively to achieve what they want to achieve, they might well kind of just, oh no, that's me. I'm stupid. I can't deal with it. Donald Norman turns it on its head and says, actually, look, that's the responsibility of the designer. The designer made this thing, maybe probably with the best of intentions, but it then actually didn't work very well in the context in which it was placed. And, I think when we talk about sort of social innovation, it's about sitting down with the charity, and rather than necessarily always giving them exactly what they want, it's about being there as an ear to really listen, understand, and not just, even just to watch and observe and kind of, go through this process where you really start to understand what their problem is. And then and I see this as a core part of the agile process, whereby you say, okay, well, maybe this change might help you. And you give them like a sort of a slice of something, and you make a suggestion, and they then adopt that, and you see how it does lead to a positive change or it doesn't. And, you iterate through that again and again. And hopefully what you have after a year or 2 years, 3 years, is this process whereby everybody has like learned about each other from this process, and also the charities and the nonprofits are actually having a more serious positive social impact as a result. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. And are there any like commonalities that run through the projects that you do for these organizations? Like, I actually have gone to a couple of these coding marathon type things where we take a 3-day weekend and there's all these nonprofits and we build something for them. And it seems like a challenge they have a lot is like they have these two groups of people. They have all these volunteers, and then they have these people who they match the volunteers up with, but they don't have a good way to manage all this stuff. And so that's like we see that kind of thing over and over again. Is there anything like that in your case where you kind of see a pattern?
Well, there's certainly. Do you mean a pattern that is a way of doing that matchup, or just a sort of any general patterns of commonality? Would you say?
Just common needs that you see with these organizations.
I think that the common needs with the organizations is that they tend to be struggling with administrative things, and so they often have a lot of paper-based procedures. And I mean, it's part of the ongoing digital revolution we have, where they're attracted by the promise of a digital solution, kind of resolving the paperwork they're using, or they've got everything in Google spreadsheets or what have you. And I think the commonality that I see is that you just, if you go in there with saying, oh yeah, no, what you need is you need to Rails things with active admin, and it's just going to do this for you, then you're going to not end up really helping them that much. That you just have to sort of go in and really do a lot of listening. And that's just really, really, really hard, because I think, particularly in a educational context, people tend to be they learn technologies rather than learning sort of techniques of problem solving, which I think is a big problem with all education in every bricks and mortar, in the boot camps, in this, that, and the other. And there's just that big conflict there. People are trying to solve the problems with these technologies when it's this, you've got to be listening to that human angle. Other big thing is it's the timescales. Like, you've got to be able to work with that organization, and you've got to have they've got to also sort of adopt this idea of the agile approach, where okay, we're going to try this little change, and then we're going to reflect on it and 2 weeks later and do the measuring to try and work out if it did have an impact. And it can be very difficult to pin people down on that, and you've got to be careful, because the charities are busy people, and you can't put too much pressure on them maybe to get the data that you want. So it's ongoing juggling, balancing act. That.
How do you deal with the, for lack of a better word, staffing for these projects? Because it sounds like there's people working on a volunteer basis, so you can't necessarily force them to be available during any certain period of time.
No.
And any organization is going to have turnover challenges and stuff like that. How do you get people together to make sure that a project gets completed?
Well, I mean, I think the key thing is having a committed project manager, and that's we're always on the lookout for people who can project manage. I think when the projects that don't really get anywhere are the ones where someone says, "Oh, I have this kind of idea," and maybe one or two other people are interested. But if you lack a person who's going to kind of be the focal point, then it pretty quickly fritters away. Even faster than the equivalent open source project that might be sort of taken up by someone else. So yeah, we're really, whenever we find someone who's got that, there are some people who are not involved with us, who are not coders. They're particularly keen to practice their project management skills. There are people who just, they're coders, but they naturally they lean towards that side of things. So kind of keeping them involved is absolutely critical. I think also the other thing that we do is kind of, I've started to coin this term, which I call open development, as kind of a level beyond open source, where we kind of say not just the code, but everything we do we record the pairing sessions, we record the meetings with the client, we record the scrums and the stand-ups, and it's all streamed onto YouTube, and all of the notes in the document, and we try and make everything available so that we won't to cope with this turnover, because people from 1 week to the next, we might have different volunteers coming in, and they need to be able to see the client meeting where the client was explaining why they needed that particular feature, and they can't necessarily rely on the person who was there hearing about it to talk to them about it. So I mean,
so they have access to everything that's ever happened.
Yes.
That's pretty interesting.
I think there's still we're not doing it as well as we could do. I think it's the problem, of course, is we then have this huge digital archive that needs organization and managing. I think the way that it's most tends to be used is people they're just checking back on what happened in the last week or a couple of weeks before. So I think we have certainly not mastered how to do this, but it's really exciting, working in that kind of completely open environment, and trying to kind of educate the new people who are coming in about how we do that and how to try and make the best of it. And yeah, I mean, that's what I love about it, is the kind of applying the Agile process to the infrastructure that supports all of these other Agile projects, and trying to, I think at some point, maybe we will get to that critical humming moment where the infrastructure support really goes to the next level, and suddenly these projects can be 10 times more effective than they would be without that support. But we do our best. It's an ongoing process.
So how did this all get started? You might have touched on it, but I'm curious. How did you go from what you were doing before to doing this? And then how did you get other people interested in it and grow it to what it is now?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I guess actually the key thing that started was, so there was this period where the MOOC, there was only the first half of the Berkeley course had been released, and it was actually in this window where Stanford at the time, they'd done these 3 really popular MOOCs, and there was a point where I know the education world was holding its breath, and it was 80,000 people had signed up for each of these AI, DB, and ML courses back. I think it was in 2011, and then there was this Stanford kind of held its breath, and I think the administration was actually, do we want to give all this stuff away for free or not? I'm not sure that we do. And there was this brief window where only this one course from Berkeley was available, and that was those first 5 weeks thing. So and it was then, so in 2012 they released the second half of that course. I think in the fall of 2012, and I think myself and several others have been yeah, they're going to do this project thing, and they didn't have it. And so I created a sort of shared Skype chat room for the students in that course, and we just got all talking about it, and we did kind of a letter writing campaign. That's not really quite the right word, but at the time it was hey, let's contact as many charities and nonprofits as we can and see who's interested in having stuff built for them. And yeah, we kind of had a shared spreadsheet, and I created the template for a letter to send to charities to ask it, sort of explain who we were and
how many did you contact,
I think it was about 20 or 25 at the time.
Okay.
And the interesting thing was I think not many other people besides myself had very much luck, but I went into there's the local volunteering center, happens to be just up my road, and that has 8 or 9 or 10 local charities right there. And I started talking to one group, and another group overheard, and I found a group that was they were yeah, that sounds great. I mean, they had their own Twitter feed, and they were quite switched on technologically. And I've been working with them ever since, and having basically weekly meetings now. That's almost coming up for 4 years with them. And you can actually, I mean, it's sort of spread over different places. The original meetings were just audio recordings. But so it sort of started on that. There wasn't really a concept of there being Agile Ventures originally. It was just that one project. And I started pairing using Google Hangouts with a few other people on this, and this is the local support project. And we started building I generated a Rails scaffold. Actually, at the time, I had been using. I was sort of, at that time, I was full-time teaching for HPU, and I was recording, but based in London. And so I was recording classes of me doing software engineering stuff. And I was then having my students in Hawaii watch that later on. And I'd started helping out on the MOOC by recording sort of intros to the assignments. And so it was a natural extension of me to say, well, this stuff of me running Rails Generate and getting the first version done, I can record all of that, and then I can share that with everybody in the Skype group, and they can see how this all gets done. And that was basically the kernel of it. And once we had that one project going, and random people from around the world and every continent started, pairing and building pieces of it. And that came up, and it was other people were oh, we could build another project. And actually, so my co-founder, Thomas Ockman, who now runs the Craft Academy bootcamp in Sweden, and he I created a Google site that was called agileventures.org. I got the domain name, and he said we should have a really big site for this that sort of supported many, many projects. And I was yeah, that would be awesome. And so, he was the first project manager on the main kind of website one, which is our code name for the website. And it sort of took off from there. And we've gradually, I was doing it part-time for a long time, and gradually more and more projects accumulated. And there you go.
Awesome. So you mentioned website one, which I had seen earlier. Is the idea behind that the website for Agile Ventures is actually open source and anybody can theoretically contribute to it?
Absolutely. Yes. And
how does that work? Because it seems like one challenge with all this stuff is you might have people contributing and making contributions that are either not very good or like their productivity is actually negative. And so like, how do you prevent against that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And so I think in the early days, the way that the website one was being run, and I was sort of playing the role of the non-technical customer, and we had a lot of people involved in that, and it was a big learning project for many people, but it also got very big very quickly. And I think, we were incurring, technical debt, and there's just sort of a, maintenance burden there. And so actually one of the things that I've done recently, and as this now has become my full-time concern, is I've kind of started to earmark certain projects, and of which Website One is an example, as a kind of priority project. And so we now, as a UK charity, we have people can donate to us. They can take up subscriptions. And so one of the base things that you get if you subscribe, start supporting us as a charity, is that then you become eligible to work on the priority project. So what I tend to do now, and I've taken over as Thomas has become more busy with other things, I've taken over the project management role on Website One, and in principle, I'm very happy for anybody to come and work on Website One, but I do need it to be focused so it's sort of supporting the core center of things. It's funny because, when somebody comes in with an idea and they want to do something, you want to kind of harness that enthusiasm. You don't want to say, no, sorry, you can't do that because that's not going to fit in with our bigger plan. At the same time, there, as you're kind of alluding to, there's a danger in going 8 different directions at once, and there not being sort of a common vision on the system there. And so I've kind of now coming into a full-time role on Agile Ventures is I'm trying to reduce what Website One does, try and get sort of a core vision there, and try and coordinate the few developers who are working on it so that we're all pushing in the same direction, because I think we do have a big responsibility to support all of the other projects. And if you want to go and do like crazy and go in this direction, that direction, there's lots of different projects to get involved in. So, I hope that's a reasonable compromise. But in an agile sense, we're always trying things out, and then we're reflecting on it. And, in a month or 2 months, maybe that's, not going to be the right thing, and we'll go in a different direction again.
So what are some of the things that you're wanting to accomplish with Agile Ventures? Like, let's say in the next few months, and then maybe the next few years, and if you have a vision for it for like the next few decades, even, whatever time scale you want to talk about it, but where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, what I would love to see is, over the next few months, more projects starting. It's actually kind of, it's getting quite active recently. We've got a couple of really interesting new projects started. I'd love to see those grow into really healthy, stable projects. I mean, it's a bit like gardening. You've got to sort of weed and tend and so on. I mean, I think what I would really love to see over the course of the next year is that we can get more sponsors, we can get more premium members signed up, and then we can actually start to afford to employ more people to basically be there on point to make sure that everybody's getting what they need in terms of support for their individual projects. And we've got it sort of, we introduced this sort of premium level of support. So you can there's a basic free tier, and then you can sort of pay for additional help and support with your educational process within Agile Ventures. And there are we've got a few sponsors, and so that's going. I'm still I'm still spinning plates, but it's sort of going in the right direction. So if that trend continues, in a year we could be in a stable place. And what I would like to see, really, 5 years, 10 years down the line, is I would like to see things like Agile Ventures. It doesn't necessarily just have to be just us filling that gap between the education and the kind of the job. I think that there is something that you get from working in a project with a real customer who has kind of like real needs. And so, you're trying all the heuristics that you learned in the bootcamp, like the solid principles, and all the different, the agile process and so on, actually trying to use those when someone's saying, look, we have to get this working by next Thursday, and you're doing it in a group. I think that's the real crucible for learning. And so if we could somehow get all the process streamlined so that anybody coming out of a university, a boot camp or whatever could come in and have that thing for all of the junior developers, mid-level developers who wanted to level up, that they could be doing this in their spare time, contributing to, the greater good around the world in the process and having a great time. I mean, that would be the long-term vision, I guess.
So, Sam, it sounds like there's different ways people could get involved and contribute depending on what your background is and where you are in your career and what kind of skills that you have to offer and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering, like, if somebody's listening to this right now and they think, hey, this sounds kind of cool. I'm interested in maybe getting involved, but I'm not sure how would be appropriate for me to get involved or if it would be appropriate for me to get involved. So, like, are there ways for, say, a junior developer to get involved or a senior developer to get involved? Maybe you could tell me about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I'd say, and I say this a lot, is I think there's certainly room for people at every level to get involved. There's in a project that's running, even if you're non-technical, there's project management, there's user interface, there's working with the client. There's all sorts of things which are really, really valuable parts of making a project work. As a junior developer, I think your input is just as valuable, even if you might not have some of the advanced technical skills. Your fresh eyes on this and your enthusiasm can make a world of difference to other people who are kind of like, this is a really tough problem that we're not sure how to solve or not how to go forward. And I think if you're a senior developer and you're slipping into that mentoring role, I mean, we kind of have now a sort of a selection of people who have been involved with Agile Ventures for a long time. We have kind of like an Agile Ventures mentors list. And if you're a senior developer interested in this stuff, I would love to speak to you and kind of get you onto that mentors list so that we can take advantage of the world, just us. I mean, the big thing is, like, rather than doing this for personal gain per se, this is trying to make education real, trying to help all of the deserving causes around the world, and sort of harness your skills and experience to help. Maybe not even coding. You're just advising, or sitting in some pairing sessions for some junior developers who are a little bit unsure. There's all sorts of opportunity to help, and it's all done remote and online. I mean, that's the big thing. It's through Slack, it's through Hangouts. We have these, every day, 3 times a day, there are scrums that are online. It's all streamed on YouTube. Come in and get involved. Email me, Slack me, whatever, and we'll.
Yeah, I was going to ask if somebody's interested in getting involved, how do they get the ball rolling with that?
Yeah, well, they can always email me at sam@agileventures.org. They can, if they sign up to the website, they just create an account on agileventures.org. They should get an automatic invite to the Slack instance, and then they can just start chatting. I'm a bit of a Slack addict. I maybe have a bit of a problem there. But
how many Slacks are you part of?
Oh, it's like 12 now, and I can't really keep up with them. And I've got it on my phone, and I had an operation recently, and then I was kind of bored at the hospital, and I was like, and now, okay. Anyway, we'll have to do cold turkey at some point.
I'm in 30 shows right now.
Oh, wow.
Impressive.
So you're the winner, Jerome, or the loser, possibly.
Let's take a break from this episode and really quickly talk about finding a job. Searching for a job can feel stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles you don't actually want, and the job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. And sometimes you go all the way through an interview process just to find out that the very end that the salary offer or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Well, there's a solution. Hired.com is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities. They make the job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of how and when you connect with compelling opportunities. And after completing one simple application, top employers apply to you. And the best part is that you get money. That's right. They pay you if you get a job through them. Listeners to this show can earn double their normal hiring bonus by signing up with the show's link. That's right. You get $2,000 instead of $1,000. So go sign up at hired.com/RubyRogues podcast.
Well, I have a few questions in regards to Agile.
Sure.
One of the things I want to know was, Jason, he touched on having a turnover of team members on a project. I want to know, when it comes to the MOOCs, so the MOOC training system, how do you handle, like, finding those who are motivated for any particular project? Like, I know a lot of that has to do with, like, the project manager trying to see not only who has the skills, but, who is motivated. Like, should we just allow a person who is a paying customer to be on website one, or do you, like, gauge their activity or their productivity on other projects or on the site or in the Slack channel? How do you guys make that gauge of just the effectiveness of? Because I'm interested in MOOCs as well, because I teach people how to use Ruby on Rails, veterans on Rails and all this other stuff.
Love your work, by the way. Really, really impressed. Really love your work.
Thank you. But one of the things that when we looked at certain avenues of like MOOCs or other type of curriculums outside of ours, things that we were seeing that just having that out there for people to be self-paced.
Yes.
Been really helping them stay motivated. So I wonder, how are you guys working on that? Because you were saying get to that level of having people get jobs or just becoming better developers in regards to like junior or mid or even like complete newbie. How do you guys handle those newbies so they don't get discouraged? Because when they jump to a project and like, holy crap, I have no idea what this is. And that's a complete, like you said, and like you don't want to think they're a complete loser. You're going to get motivated from that. So just those are all things that I was really interested in. I was saying, I didn't really hear like, how do you handle that people aspect? Like one of the things you work on, or one of the things we're focusing on is we're focusing on bringing on somebody who literally just handles people.
Yes.
Like that's someone that manages just people and personalities.
Sure.
Then you have everybody else that does nerd stuff. So, so I just want to know what was your ideas on that? How you're solving that problem?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I'll just start with the MOOC, and I think that the MOOCs, they put all of this stuff out there, and really the MOOCs are probably most valuable for people who are already extremely motivated. There's kind of a. I was going to start talking about the unconferences and the law of 2 feet and people kind of going to where they want to be. I think MOOCs are fantastic resources. I think the things that made the difference with the new range of MOOCs compared to like from 10 years ago, we had like loads of open courseware and so on, was the auto-graders that kind of made it, I think motivation comes a lot from feedback. And so, there was a new round of automated feedback that came with some of the more recent MOOCs, and that kind of made them more exciting and engaging, but still nothing compared to a boot camp where you have a group of people like, we're going to help you, or a university bricks and mortar to a lesser extent. It's having that other human being who's really engaged in your learning process that actually helps people who are not so motivated. We have, though, I think a kind of fundamental problem with Agile Ventures, or one of the fundamental problems that we're trying to solve is that I think particularly for people who are not necessarily so confident or so motivated, is that they will generally be intimidated by the idea of having, a client or a real project. They will probably tend to
from like underrepresented communities, like especially when we're thinking about minorities or women. Even in the UK, the women technology movement is really focusing on bringing those like underrepresented minorities in tech or that aren't as included in technology into the field. So I want to those are problems that we face as well as in our organization, trying to make them feel like, it's okay and this is a safe space and deal with that empathy and understanding of that. So I want to pick your brain because, we're kind of in the same field, but with everybody, and I just deal with one piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
So I was really intrigued by that.
Yeah, well, it is. I think it's one of the fascinating problems. I mean, I can't claim that we've solved it. I think we have the advantage that any boot camp with a sort of more structured curriculum has is that structured curriculum will feel safer, and we have this more sort of organic kind of projects sort of turning over each other, which is, by its very nature, slightly more intimidating. But I think it's like where we can make a connection with the individual. That's where we can make a difference. And I think it comes down from creating this safe space. And so one of the things we say about what we're doing with Agile Ventures is, you might have the inclination, you might be hearing from people that you should submit to something to open source. You should contribute to open source. You do a pull request. That'd be a good thing. That's in what we try and say with Agile Ventures is like, you submitting a pull request in Agile, one of the Agile Ventures projects, it's a safe space. And so you're going to get, a positive reaction, and you're going to get, people who are not only interested in the quality of the code coming in and how that's going to fit in with the bigger project, but also interested in your learning. And I think bottom line, it takes a lot of humility. And I've failed at this in the past as kind of an academic, and where we come from the academic world where it's a lot of like right or wrong, and it's this or that other. And I think in the past tend to be, well, you shouldn't do this, or you should do this, or what have you. I think, yeah, it's something. I mean, I can sort of say this. It's easy to say all the things that I've done wrong in the past more than the things to do right. Maybe is I've trying to always be pushing people to sort of discuss things in open channels and in front of the group. I'm kind of like an extrovert. I tend to like this whole stream everything online. Was my idea. I'm kind of like strangely happy with everybody seeing almost everything I do. Almost my entire life is televised these days. But what I've realized is I think particularly for people who are not so motivated, not so confident, what they want is to be able to connect in private. So like I think the direct message on Slack, and what I particularly do with all of our premium members is I'm reaching out to them individually on a regular basis. We assign mentors to them, and I think it's actually touching back on the Donald Norman thing. We often find that, for example, a student, independently of whether they are in an underrepresented group or that they have additional challenges, but like just for everybody, they're going to get stuck on Git or the process of like getting their thing into the pull request, and that's incredibly disempowering for people. And they think I'm not smart enough to use Git or to get this done. And the thing I will say to them is like, actually, this Git, it's this crazy power tool, and everybody gets stuck on it. And actually, don't beat yourself up about it. It's a reflection of, at some level, poor design of the tool. And part of what we're all in this together is to try, like all of these things are open source. They're all sort of thrown out there and people are building on it. And your experience of having trouble with it is actually really valuable. If we can harness that and build on that, we can actually make it easier for the next person. And, I think there's no substitute for trying to make that human connection with the person who's struggling with that thing. And I think that the big thing about creating that safe space, and whether that safe space is like you having a private one-to-one hangout with them or an individual one-to-one chat, that's kind of the key from my point of view. I'm not saying we do it fantastically well, but I think for where I am now, I've identified that that's the direction I think we need to go in to support people effectively.
Roger that. We do a similar case. It's very funny when you mentioned the GitHub issue, because people do not, new developers don't realize just how normal that problem is. So like developers across the board, the first places they usually get hung up on is how to do a pull request, or how to use command line. So I'm like, how to use their terminal. I'm like, that's normal. You're not supposed to, be a whiz on terminal day one. If you were good, like we tell our guys, like if you're good on terminal day one, you wouldn't be here. So, but all right. So in regards to your, you mentioned like the direct messaging, actually reaching out. Are you afraid that the direct messaging or going through that clause will start a more cliquish environment? Like that's another, like we initially thought about that, but then we turned away from that because we did not want to risk like teams and cohorts not communicating with each other. So we tried to focus out of like the leadership team and the like staff, like instead of team operations and leadership team, we try to keep everything as open as possible.
I mean, I think go on.
I'm sorry. Like somebody else might have the same question that you have, and you're not answering that question out or asking that question out openly, then I might have to answer that question like 100 times.
Yeah.
Or, people just don't know that it's okay to ask questions. So that's one of the things that we try to. I tell them, we're all idiots together. Like your stuff, I don't. I'm always asking questions. I'm not afraid to ask a question at all. So don't be afraid to. Admit that you're not 100% sure, and just ask questions. I just want to know, what's your idea? Like, do you think that may eventually become problematic with the idea of direct messaging?
I think you're right. I think I've kind of built the direct messaging back in after a long period of pushing people kind of away from that. I think you're right. I think if it becomes all isolated communication, between individuals, that gets into a big problem. It's also not sustainable in terms of that puts a huge load on lots of individuals. I mean, I think it's all about the timing and the situation in which you're pushing the person out of their safe space and into that group space. I mean, I I've spent a lot of time in my university career in boot camp trying to encourage students to post on Stack Overflow, and and then I had to give them I have the Sam Joseph Stack Overflow guarantee of protection. If someone gives you a hard time on Stack Overflow, I will go and literally, or virtually, not metaphorically, slap them around, and I will +1 you and star you and like make sure that you get help, forming the question in the right way. So I mean, I've been kind of amazed personally, because I have this kind of blasé attitude towards asking things in almost any context, that I've been amazed over the years to discover that actually that's something that people are so afraid of. Like, I think they said that the number one fear ahead of dying is talking in public. And I love talking in public so much that I'm like, what? But, it's like through repeated encounters, where I think actually probably the majority of the population is that's actually really painful for them to ask a question. But I don't know if this relates to some sort of human psychology or the education system that we have around the world, or what it is. But getting people out of that natural, okay, I'm just going to ask this. I'm maybe not going to ask it. Well, one, I'm going to suffer in silence for 4, 5, 20 hours before I'm then bashing my head against the keyboard and then give up. Okay, maybe we can get them away from that, and then, maybe I'll ask quietly to just one person. And, I think that what I've recognized is that if you try and push people away from their comfort zone of the one-to-one question or the sort of the focus, they get very, very uncomfortable very quickly. And it's about that sort of timing. So it's about offering them that line of support when they're originally reaching out, as exactly as you're saying, connecting it to like, this is a problem that everyone has, but then connecting it in, a little bit at a time with the philosophy on open source and how the process of asking your question can actually be very powerful and very enabling and help the entire world to build, a better future. I know I'm talking there in like silly rhymes or what have you, but you know what I mean, right? It's about...
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, your insight that you thought was you being stupid, that's actually the thing that can help a person improve their software. And that's the incremental and what beautiful evolutionary way that all of this open source software that we use to do great things gets built. So but I think it's very difficult for the learner to kind of believe that the first time around. They kind of have to hear that again and again, and you can't push it on them too hard, or they're just going to like, who is this crazy British guy who's like trying to talk to me all the time? So anyway, you know what I'm saying.
I've been there, and just to piggyback on one thing you said, it's kind of crazy that like the number one problem in all like education based industries, so when it comes to technology companies or nonprofits, seems to be students wanting to reach out on Stack Overflow, like from for-profit code schools to universities to even nonprofits such as yours. What I've seen is that the number one problem is new people reaching out on Stack Overflow, and that fear of having a Stack Overflow troll come at somebody because they've deemed that question not smart enough. So how do you have like any now? Do you have like any type of prior, or what we have is like mentors that they can ask before they go to Stack Overflow? Or we have, if they're not asking us, we set up I guess we call it our first line of defense, which your mentors, and these people answer questions. I help you with pair programming, things of that nature before you go into the abyss of Stack Overflow. So first, I would say, I don't totally understand the whole going in and having your newbies go into the Stack Overflow abyss. Totally sucks when you're afraid that somebody's going to be a jerk to them. And want to see if you had started solving that problem and that method as well.
Yeah, well, and then it's actually one of the key things that our premium members get is they get access to a sort of a separate private channel with the mentors there. And that's then, I think that what we see from that is that, by creating that sort of semi-private space, that actually helps people along the path. And this was a difficult step for me because it was sort of antithetical to the whole open development thing, that I was kind of like, I believe that this all needs to be open and so on. But I think, it was a concession on my part, but I think it's bearing fruit, is that by creating sort of a staged series of spaces of different levels of privacy, you can actually help scaffold people towards that path where they will get to the point where they will have the confidence to ask anybody anything. So yeah, it's Great question.
Are people really afraid to ask stuff on Stack Overflow?
Yes, new troops. I'm sorry, not troops. New developers are terrified of Stack Overflow. I've had several type of interviews with new
You
troops
just
that are
cut
coming out
out,
of for-profit
Jerome.
schools.
Can you say that again? Just the
Hello,
last couple seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had experiences with new troops, or I keep saying troops, but new like developers from for-profit schools. Even when I talk to veterans that come through our program that have tried to go the MOOC path, or like the going to like a free program or things like that nature, they are, there are so many horror stories about Stack Overflow developers attacking people who are not, who aren't well versed in this craft. And that has actually stopped a lot of people from joining the community. I've heard it from several women, several other underrepresented minority groups, where one of the things that they've turned them off has not been how hard our craft is, but just interaction in open spaces such as Stack Overflow being.
Well, let me offer just a quick word of encouragement in case we have anybody listening who shares that same fear of posting stuff on Stack Overflow. Think of what kind of person is going to just go around squashing people's questions and stuff on Stack Overflow. What kind of person doesn't have anything better to do than just post negative comments on people's Stack Overflow questions? Because I've definitely had that same thing happen to me. And I'll be honest that it bothered me a little bit when I saw these comments that people were saying my question was dumb or whatever. Or, they might not come out and say something quite like that, but they'll definitely be very tactless with some of their comments. But you need to grow a little bit of a thick skin. That's just a general skill to have in general that will benefit you in your life. So don't be afraid to do that thing that you need to do to get your job done, to post a question on Stack Overflow just because you're afraid somebody will say something mean about you. And then consider the fact that these people posting these comments, they're losers for just posting these mean things back at you. And also, some of the things they say, although they may not say it in a very nice way, it might be legitimate feedback. When you post a question, read your question before you post it and think okay, am I describing the things that I've already tried? Am I including the full story of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish? Not just at a really fine grain, but what's the overall thing that I'm trying to accomplish? Because having the skill of asking a good question is also a really useful skill to have too.
That's one of the things that we having one of our troops write a blog post on it, because he did it. He went out there and he did it, and it worked really well. And I was I think that's something that people should know, how to ask a question on Stack Overflow. The Stack Overflow that keep you from attracting jerks. So, but I've been there. I have to deal with these people who are being mean to newbies. I've seen it firsthand when it comes when I was in New York and dealing with General Assembly. I was wow, people really do this to people. There was one young woman, she posted on Stack Overflow, and then just a swarm of negative comments. I was wow, that's crazy. So I think we should go back to that first rule of Google, of do no evil. Maybe the community, because that's one thing that helped us grow as well. So, but
by the way, there's this quote I really like: "To avoid criticism, do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing." Mm-hmm. So, if you're afraid of putting yourself out there for fear of criticism, you're gonna get criticized just by being alive. So don't be afraid of it.
Hey, do you need a sanity check on your code? Make sure all the tests are passing. Make sure all the static assets compile. All the normal things that you need to do to make sure that your application is ready for production. Then you need continuous integration. And I recommend Snap CI. Snap CI is a product put together by our friends at ThoughtWorks. And it works great to pull all of your information together about your application, make sure it's ready for production, let your team know if it fails, and overall just make your life easier. So go check them out at snapci.com. Well, one other thing that I would like to just add to this is that a lot of times they are worried, is this a really stupid question to ask? And the really stupid question to ask is the one that you waited 2 hours to ask. In other words, just get in and ask it. I don't think there is a stupid question. I think, somebody might get in and say, hey, the answer's on this other question on Stack Overflow. Maybe you could have spent a couple minutes looking for another answer. But other than that, I mean, more than likely, if you're getting feedback that means anything, it's we need to know this information too, or we need you to go through these couple of troubleshooting steps or something like that. But even then, you're learning every time you do it. And so if you're killing time and, wasting a bunch of effort trying to figure something out that somebody can say, hey, here's how you solve it in 5 minutes, that, to me, the stupid question is, it was stupid not to ask it.
I know there is a such thing as a stupid question, though, for sure. Like, I've seen a lot of really dumb questions on Stack Overflow. But if you're afraid that you're asking a dumb question, like, invest some time into how not to ask a dumb question. Because there's definitely approaches you can take, and it's a learnable skill to ask a good question.
Yeah, I think that's really key. I mean, I'm just going to connect there with Jerome. I through the different experience, university, boot camp, MOOCs, and so on. There are definitely people who are really afraid of this. I think everything you're saying there, Jason, is correct. That's to be alive is to be subject to criticism. I think one of the things here there is a sort of the middle ground which is also being touched on, which is that it's about the way in which you ask the question. And I think sometimes, particularly for learners, although I think also, well, everybody's a learner, I mean, particularly for relatively inexperienced developers, but also experienced developers, we're so aware of our kind of the context of what we're doing. We're so aware of how this was difficult, that was difficult. When we frame the question, we fail to do that work, which is to provide the surrounds, which is like maximizes the chance that the person can help us. And that absolutely, as I think several people said, that is such a valuable skill to learn. And I think I've certainly seen some situations where the feedback that's been received is about, it's maybe rather brusque, but it's about probing to try and get that extra information. But the person who's in that learning situation, who's maybe for other reasons outside of work, feeling like not so good or whatever, they can sort of take that, and it's sort of, it's about, for some people, just in the wrong place to receive that. And, the big thing really is to work with people to sort of show them how they can ask these questions in the right way in order to get the right sort of response. And once you've done that, that's a real enabler that allows people to start feeling, on a spiral of confidence going up instead of one going down. It's
Right. Back to, I had another question about Agile Ventures. I want to know, what is the adoption rate or the scaling? Like, how many people, let's say, monthly end up joining that, like the projects, things of that nature? Are you guys getting like, 20 people, 200 people, 5,000 people? Like, I've seen some crazy numbers in some places. So
yeah, I mean, so we've I would say that there, since the start, we've gone from a few members to, over the last year, I would say like a sort of a core of 20 members. And we're seeing like an increase. We've now got like 6 or 7 active projects, which have each got, sort of 5+ members involved. So we're not at the scale of on the people who are like really actively working. I think we're not yet more than 100 people being really active. We get about 1,500 people looking at the site every month and so on. So, it's at a fairly small scale at the moment. And I'm, that'll be the trick really going forward, is taking what we do and scaling it up. I think there's a potential, as Jason was asking before about, where do we see it in 5 or 10 years? I would like to see, hundreds, thousands of projects. We've got a further collaboration with UC Berkeley to create an online project course, which will, try and take the scale up another level next year. And, I think in principle, there's no reason why it shouldn't ultimately scale up indefinitely. It's just, you've got to have that infrastructure and support in place. I think that I'm going to kind of maybe take it in a direction for that. One of the key things I've learned over the last year or two is that kind of, I think far more important than any of the heuristics like the the solid principles or the design patterns or, BDD or TDD. I mean, we have suggestions for ways of doing things, XP and everything coming out of our ears as developers. And it's very, very easy for people to kind of take a position and say, oh, well, you didn't use this process or there's this problem, and so what you're doing is not wonderfully good. I think that kind of the key thing for the success of these projects is actually all about the humans kind of being kind of forgiving of each other and kind of like allowing the project to take its own course. I think it's a bit like what they talk about, the principle of 2 feet in the unconference. That's kind of like, if you're not really enjoying the session that you're in, right, then go and start another session. And I think, over the years we've seen, there's some strong personalities have clashed in different projects and so on. I think there's no magic solution to that other than to allow people to sort of drift towards the groups that they're interested in and trying to instill, if you can, across the whole panoply of projects, this idea that there is no one perfect right way to do things. Every team should be able to sort of kind of choose their own tools, to try things out. I think the one thing that we would just say we would be really worried if you didn't have was this agile process of reflection. If you're not kind of, making a few changes and then looking about how that has effect positively or negatively what you're doing, then you're starting to run into trouble. And so, I mean, in the past, people have talked about, we're going to scale if we impose this, or this is the way to make this happen. I like to imagine this kind of utopia of a general support framework for all of these different projects going on that are all evolving the way they do things themselves, and then having a chance to share with each other and learn from each other as it goes forward. Whether we'll ever scale that on larger is an open question, but it's a fun problem to work on for the time being.
Roger that. My final question, I know we're probably getting close to starting to have to do our picks and things of that nature. Do you, because we're both, like I said, we're kind of in the same field as well as Jason, as well, because he has an online book education course for melding a JS framework with Rails. Right. Do you think this is the future of like education? I personally feel like it is. People are going to, technology is changing how people are interacting, and education is that last frontier. And like, I believe your organization, similar to mine, is a remote first organization. And do you think that's like the path that people are going to start going? Like, we don't want to go through the process of having all this physical infrastructure when we can go online and build an infrastructure and community straight from there. So the first question is about education. Second one was about going, like, do you think this is going to be the future in both ways, going online first to build your community for education, as well as, building an infrastructure for companies and organizations online rather than like real life?
Yeah, great questions. Again, on the education side, I think for me personally, because I would love to see it going that way, because I've always kind of struggled with an education system that sort of tries to sort of tell you things and then you memorize it and then you regurgitate it for an exam. And it's kind of like, is it soul destroying? Does anybody actually like going through that process? I think there's an aspect to which, universities, liberal art colleges and so on are kind of giving you tasters of how, different things to do. But it's like, I don't know, that kind of like that, much as I'm a person who task switches within a project, like rather than having 3 months of lectures where I do 2 hours of one thing here and 2 hours of another thing there, I would like to focus on one thing for, a period. But I mean,
it's just taking bits and taking chunks and bits of each one. I totally understand.
I mean, there's no reason in principle why universities can't do that. And I also work with a group of instructors who use the MOOC materials around the world. And so there's a group, I think, is it Colorado College, they've actually adopted a kind of a boot camp style. They do like the compressed course in sort of in 3 months. So, whether the revolution there may come from the universities, I'd certainly love to see the education thing going that way. To the second part of your question, which I think is also really interesting, I think that there's actually an extraordinary possibility for a revolution here, where we depopulate the cities like this. People can become these digital nomads and just be rather than having to do these horrible commutes into the centers, like, and like, who wants to do that? It is incredibly empowering. I mean, I think it's partly as people get more and more familiar with the remote and online technologies, that's going to become more and more a possible reality. I think the signs are there, and if we're lucky, it'll lead to a happier, healthy workforce with people actually being able to do things that they find more meaningful. I mean, fingers crossed.
Every time I have to go into the city, a little piece of me dies. Like, I absolutely loathe.
I hear you.
I absolutely loathe going into Nashville. It's the saddest experience of my life. Like, you guys don't understand how depressed I am in the car. Like 5 minutes away from my computer doing absolutely nothing productive, but moving from one spot to the next for like a 10, 15-minute meeting. And it's usually because somebody is not comfortable using technology. And so I definitely understand the pain of commuting. It makes me, like, just thinking about it right now, I'm getting sad all over. Like, yesterday I had to go 45 minutes for a 15-minute meeting, and I was just mad for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I totally hear that.
I wonder how many people are listening to this on their commute.
At the very least, that podcasts make it's podcasts like this that make the commute bearable. Personally, I find it's podcasts are. I'm only relatively recently into podcasts, and I think they're an amazingly beautiful thing.
Podcasts and games, people, or what I heard, like, are the top two things that people do while commuting and go to the restroom. And I was like, so people are listening to us, are either in the bathroom or they're going from point A to point B. Yeah, I was like, wow. Or maybe, and I heard working out was another one.
We're doing the dishes.
Jogging. Yeah, it's
or exercise, doing dishes. I didn't see chores on it. I definitely have to look at that list again. It just was funny to me that, so someone's either using the bathroom or traveling when they're doing this.
Maybe there's like a doctor somewhere performing an appendectomy while he's listening to this episode.
I guess I hope not, because I'd like to think he was really focused on his one thing. We're having an exciting discussion here. I don't want to distract him. Just want the knife. Just
this is high level. I want the doctor to be doing something that's like, it's just, I need you 100% focused on the person that you have cut open right now.
All the doctors out there, if you're doing the appendectomy, focus on the patient, okay?
Speaking of the patient, I think we have gotten ourselves distracted a little bit. Let's go ahead and do picks.
Sure.
Roger that.
Jason, do you want to start us off with picks?
Sure, I got 2 picks. My first pick is a book called Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I listened to the audio version, which I thought was great. It's narrated by the author. Just a quick snippet from the book. He talked about the difference. So flow is about getting into like a flow state where you kind of lose track of time and you're just really into what you're doing, and how to get into the flow state. One of the most interesting parts I found about that book was the difference between enjoyment and pleasure. So like pleasure might be when you're watching TV or something like that. But enjoyment is when you're engaged in maybe some kind of skill-based activity, and it's a different kind of thing. So that was just a really interesting book. I'd listened to the whole thing a couple times just because I thought it was so great. My other pick is me. So I'm a consultant, and I'm hireable to write code, and I also do mentorship and training and stuff like that. And I have some availability coming up potentially in January 2017 to work with a client. So if you're interested in talking with me about that, send me an email at jason@benfranklinlabs, and we can talk.
Awesome. Jerome, what are your picks?
All right. I was making sure I had all my picks pointed out, but my first pick, I don't know if I talked about this before, but I'm reading it again. I am absolutely loving it. It's called Dataclysm. Basically, one of the founders of OkCupid, and he talks about how data is so important, to our life. Just in like the idea of like for instance, looking at his app, how right now every year 200 couples are married that have met on OkCupid, and of those, roughly 50% have kids. So you have there's 100 kids out there that their parents met on OkCupid every year. and it's an amazing book, and it really just changes how you look at life. Another pick is Remote, the book by DHH. We recently had him as an AMA for our troops, talking about his book and just his process of how he gets so much crap done. And we realized that a lot of that had to do with the fact that he does not leave his house.
Nice.
So that is another pick, but especially if you're looking to go into a remote business or turning your company into remote, just all of those, just so much great information on how to use the remote work environment to your advantage. So Dataclysm and Remote will be my 2 picks.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here with a couple of picks. The first one is an app that I found for Google Drive, which I've been using more and more. Google Drive and this app too. It's called MindMup. It's a mind mapping tool, and it just sits right on top of Google Drive. It's really cool. So if you do mind mapping as part of your process for something, then go check it out. It's mindmup.com. So really enjoying that. And then the other thing that I'm going to pick is I've mentioned a few times on the show that I set a goal to listen to everything on Audible that was recorded by Zig Ziglar, who is a motivational speaker, success coach kind of guy. He passed away a few years ago, but they've got 100 and something hours of content on there. And I basically bought everything that didn't look like it was a duplicate. So like if there was Courtship After Marriage and the new Courtship After Marriage, I just got the new Courtship After Marriage. But I've been listening lately to his Born to Win seminar. And if you listen to a lot of his other stuff, you're going to get a lot of repeated content. But this is like 15 hours of just, here's how to be a successful person. And it's terrific. So I'm going to pick the Born to Win seminar on Audible by Zig Ziglar. Sam, what are your picks?
Okay, yeah, thanks. So I think I'm going to start off with the technical one. There's a gem called Railroady, which is basically it works with Rails, and it will draw kind of a data model and controller map automatically from your existing models and controllers. And I found that really useful in terms of legacy projects, looking in there, even just stuff that I've been working on myself and it's kind of got a bit out of control. So Railroady, that's the guy Preston on GitHub. I really recommend checking that out. That's a good gem. And then I've got a couple of like my sort of I'm quite into science fiction and things. I got an anthology of like the complete works of H.P. Lovecraft recently, and I read through that, and there was one that I particularly hadn't read before called The Shadow Out of Time, and I want to pick I pick H.P. Lovecraft generally, but particularly this Shadow Out of Time is, one of the things I love about the anthology is it builds up and you can see his early work. I would say that this Shadow Out of Time is kind of his pinnacle. It is just, I will not say anything else, just read it. It's a sort of short story, fantastic. And then a final one is there is a book that I've got. It is called Gene Stealer Cults by Peter Favari. I'm probably pronouncing his name incorrectly, but this is like there is a sort of tabletop fantasy game called Warhammer 40K here in the UK from Games Workshop, and which I used to play when I was younger, and I'm kind of like reliving some of that by reading these novels set in this universe. And I kind of like the sub pick there is I'm going to pick the Tyranids, who are this like look it up on Wikipedia. They are like an insane race. So I'm kind of like reliving some of my old Dungeons and Dragons Games Workshop days with all that.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, Sam, if people want to follow you, find out what you're doing, see what you're tweeting about, where do they go?
Yeah, so agileventures.org is the site. My kind of online name is Tansaku, so Tansaku. We'll go in the show notes when I'm that on GitHub, that with an extra U on Twitter due to having my name stolen. But yeah, feel free to email me, sam@agileventures.org, or if you sign up for a membership at our agileventures.org site, you'll get an invite to our Slack, and then just hit me up on Slack because I am, as mentioned before, a bit of an addict.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up the show. Thank you for coming, and we'll catch everyone next week.
Thanks for having me.